if it weren't for her constantly pushing me and motivating me and believing in me, introducing me to retirement, 401ks, like I was 16 years old and she's throwing Kiplinger magazines at me every time I came over to the house. And I'm like, I don't even have income. Like, what are we doing with 401ks? But it was a very clear setup. And I'm glad she did it, because then even as I went into my career and as I started playing around with entrepreneurship, she was literally the first person to be my cheerleader. And she even gave me a couple $1,000s one time for one of them. And she always said to always have courage. And that's stuck with me ever since she's passed away. And it's something I think about all the time, because in entrepreneurship, it literally is courage. And there's a huge uncertainty at the end of that road that can go one of two ways. And that's been really my guiding light to get through all the different situations I've had.
Welcome back to The In Factor, where we explore the stories behind entrepreneurial grit, creativity, and courage. I'm your host, Dr. Rebecca White, and today's guest is someone I met recently at the Global Entrepreneurship Congress in Indianapolis, a rising entrepreneur with a global mindset and a heartwarming origin story. Jason Brown is the founder of Deliveri, Deliveri, a logistics tech startup focused on helping small e-commerce businesses simplify international shipping. Whether you're a solo Etsy creator, a Shopify user, or a side hustler trying to build your own online store, Jason and his team are building the infrastructure to help you ship globally and compete with giants like Amazon. Jason and I were introduced by my good friend and colleague, Dr. Ted Zoller at UNC Chapel Hill, where Jason completed his MBA and began seriously to pursue entrepreneurship. What really struck me in our conversation was Jason's clarity around the difference between building a product and building a business, a distinction many first-time founders overlook. It's something I talk about in both of my books, See, Do, Repeat, The Practice of Entrepreneurship, and Exploring the Practice of Entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is not just about a great idea. It's about the ongoing process of action, reflection, adaptation, and repeat. That's the See, Do, Repeat. A central theme in Jason's story and in my upcoming book, Choose Yourself Groups, is the importance of mindset. One of the most inspiring parts of our discussion is when Jason shares the story of his grandmother, Barbara, who grew up on a cotton farm in Mississippi, and as a young woman, packed a suitcase, boarded a bus to D.C., and built an impressive career working for the Pentagon. She wasn't an entrepreneur in the traditional sense, but she absolutely lived the entrepreneurial mindset, taking initiative, investing in herself, pushing through fear, and staying resilient. It was Barbara who introduced Jason to the concept of long-term planning, financial independence, and personal courage, values that now serve as the foundation of Deliveri. Today's episode is full of practical insights, from international logistics to team building, from bootstrapping to raising capital, and above all, the power of having the right people around you. Jason reminds us that every great business is ultimately about people, not just the customers you serve, but also mentors, partners, and supporters who help you along the way. So here's the mindset takeaway for today. Entrepreneurship is less about having all the right answers or even having all the answers, and more about having the courage to keep asking better questions. Whether you're launching a new business or reimagining your life, success starts by choosing yourself and surrounding yourself with people who help you move from idea to execution. Let's dive into this thoughtful and energizing conversation with Jason Brown. Jason, welcome to the In Factor.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm really glad to have you here. I'm excited to hear about your new startup. I know I met you about a week or so ago in Indianapolis. We were both there for the Global Entrepreneurship Conference, and I met you through my good friend Ted Zoller. Do a little shout out to him at UNC
Yeah,
Chapel Hill.
go Tar Heels.
And I think he's been a mentor to you. And of course, I'd love to hear more about that as we go through the show. I was very interested in what you're doing and thought it would be a great story that we could share with our Infactor audience. So your company is Deliveri, but that's spelled with an I on the end instead of a Y. And I think you said that your website is on Deliveri, Deliveri. And for those of you who are watching, you can see it on your shirt. But tell us a little bit, Jason, about Deliveri. What do you do? And then we'll kind of dive into how you got to where you are.
Yeah, sure. So thanks again for having me. Deliveri, basically what we're building is a logistics tech stack for direct to consumer brands in the US and Latin America. So we're putting together a multi-carrier solution platform so that these small businesses can access discounted shipping rates from some of the best couriers in the US and abroad. And the real goal is to ultimately give them a better shot at success, especially for early stage e-commerce brands. They already run into enough challenges. Margins are already very thin, and they don't have access to the tools that not only lower the cost of shipping, but also increase customer retention, create repeat buyers, build brand loyalty and trust. Those tools do exist. They're out there, but they're very fragmented. They're expensive, and they're mostly purpose built for enterprise level customers. So we thought there's a whole part of the market in e-commerce that is essentially being ignored in this space. And we can essentially reverse engineer some of those products and bring them to the business owner sooner and increase their likelihood of success as an e-commerce business.
Yeah. So a lot of small and medium sized businesses that are selling online use platforms like Shopify, for example, and other ways to sell online. So would you say you integrate with those platforms that they're using already?
We do, exactly. So our ideal customer is a Shopify user, an Etsy user. You're selling on TikTok Shop or Instagram Shop. Basically, if you're self-fulfilling, meaning you're the one picking and packing the product, you're taping it up, printing the label and shipping it out, that is who uses our platform because we resell you the label and we give you access to all those different couriers in one platform. But yes, that is with Shopify's tremendous success, their growth. It's something that we see a lot of people migrating to, especially even as side hobbies, right? Especially in during COVID, post COVID. It's so much easier now with the advent of Shopify and Alibaba as your sourcing supplier. You can easily advertise on Meta. So it's much easier nowadays to start your own e-commerce business. But at the end of the day, you still need a shipping partner. And it's something that not a lot of businesses, especially business owners, really put a lot of thought and effort into in the early stage. And we want to
Yeah, I know I've seen that when I've worked with entrepreneurs or when I've worked with students who are putting together business plans or with entrepreneurs that logistics sometimes is the last thing they think about. But how important do you think logistics is when you're talking about selling a product online? And what are some of the things that can go wrong?
It's extremely important. I mean, 67% of shopping cart abandonments are due just to high shipping costs. So you've gone through the hassle of acquiring a customer. You spent the money in the ads. You've created the brand. You got them to your checkout page, and then you lose them because your shipping cost is just too high. That right there is a terrible experience as a business owner, and it's demoralizing. So that's where we come in. We obviously reduce that, but the importance of building out more of a brand experience because it's already a very crowded market, right? E-commerce is extremely crowded. It's very hard to break through the surface and get your name out there. And what a lot of people don't realize is that once you've made that sale, the shipping experience is a huge opportunity to leverage a brand building opportunity. So branded tracking pages, tracking updates, keeping them informed of your package, providing a simplified returns process or insurance claims process. And those are statistically proven. I mean, there are statistical metrics behind the benefits of having a branded tracking page or offering insurance on a shipment. And that's something that we talk a lot about with early stage customers, is to not neglect that and not think of it as uh, a value suck and a value negative, right? Taking money from your business, but flip it and change your perspective and say, look, how can I leverage this? It's a cost I have to have, but how can I leverage it into an opportunity so that I can grow my business or create repeat buyers?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are so many things that can go wrong. Even, your package comes damaged when you get it. It takes forever to get it. I ran into that not too long ago. And this was something I actually bought from a Shopify someone that was selling books online, an indie book publisher. And it was a book I bought and it was coming from Europe. And it kind of got lost in the whole process of, I guess, getting into the country and getting through customs and all of that. So do you deal with that kind of issue too? Do you ship all around the world? I mean, does your service help me as a seller ship all around the world?
Yes, we do. That's actually more of our focus is on the international shipping. That's our specialty. Not only is international shipping a lot more expensive, but it is more complex because now enters the duties and taxes, which are tariffs and surcharges that you're seeing in the news right now. We provide the ability for you to pay those upfront, and we e-file those in the back end so that when you ship something to Europe or to Asia or to Latin America, you don't risk your recipient, the buyer of your product, rejecting that customs charge. So what normally happens is if you sold something to a customer in the UK, you ship them a product, you paid $20, $30, $40 in shipping. It gets into the UK, and then the courier is going to call that customer and say, hey, we have your package, but you owe us 30, 50, $60 in taxes and fees and tariffs. That customer can reject it and say, no, never mind, I don't want it. Now they're calling you. They want a refund. They don't want the order. You got to refund the money and you have to pay to ship it back. So not only is it a cost problem, but now what a lot of people don't realize, these small businesses don't carry a lot of inventory, right? So now you have an inventory problem where you have a product stuck in another country or in transit that just cost you a bunch of money. So it's very important that people understand going into a sale or when a sale happens, especially internationally, I can go to that customer and say, look, there is an extra charge here. We can pay it up front, which I would prefer to do. And you can transfer me the extra money to do that. Or we can cancel the order. It's an extra $100 to ship it to you on a $200 order. It might not be worth it. Like we can save all of us the hassle and we can cancel that. But at least you provide a much better experience. The customer now trusts you a lot more. You may have lost the sale, but you did prevent any kind of major issues.
Yeah, I can imagine that competing today with Amazon, for example, is very hard if you're selling directly online because Amazon has such a big system and they've got that whole delivery. They've got a huge network. And so I'm small time mom pop shop. I want to sell more directly so I can have more control over my product and more direct relationship with my customer. And I can make more money selling it directly rather than selling it, say, on Amazon. But figuring all this out is really complicated. So I got to know, Jason, how did you come up with this idea? I mean, is this something that you experienced personally? Did you figure it out, in a job that you had somewhere else? I mean, how did it work?
Yeah. So I kind of fell into the e-commerce space. My background was nowhere near this. I was actually a photonics engineer. I built telecommunication networks all around the world prior to this for 13 years and then went into sales engineering and did that for big corporations. But it wasn't until I went back to school, I got my MBA at UNC. Ted Zoller is one of my
With our good friend Ted.
That's right. And that's what really spawned the seriousness of entrepreneurship for me. And then from there, I had co-founded another startup that was in a similar space, but it was based in Latin America. And we helped Latin American businesses ship, but it was a very rudimentary product. It wasn't even a platform. It was done through WhatsApp and Excel. But from that, I interviewed hundreds of customers and people selling their products, especially in Latin America. But the what they were trying to do was so unique and not being solved by what was out there, because in Latin America, things are about 10 years behind. So the technology we have here usually takes about 10 years to catch up in that region. And what a lot of customers wanted to do was ship into the US. They wanted to sell into luxury markets, and the benefit greatly outweighed the cost of international shipping, because they could sell that product for 5, 10 times more than they sold it domestically in Colombia or Mexico or Ecuador. And they could sell it for a lot more in the US market or the European market or even the part of the Asian market, right? And even though the cost of shipping went way up, the profit margin went twofold, threefold, fivefold more, because now they can sell that product for a lot more. But the problem was nobody was really building a comprehensive solution. And it didn't just stop there. It wasn't just about the shipping costs, because even if you did ship it into another country and you sold a product into another country, there's a huge trust issue. And us as an American buying something from a Latin American company or even an Asian or European, if there's an issue, maybe there's a language barrier on the customer service side, right? You know, I don't speak Spanish, or I don't speak French, or I don't speak Chinese. So there's a big issue on that. How do I know that this is a reputable seller? What do I do in the instance of a return? And most of these customers don't have returns situated, especially shipping into other countries. So from there, I ultimately left that startup. We bootstrapped that one. My co-founders wanted to keep it a small kind of lifestyle business for them. That's fine. Ultimately, I thought there was a much bigger opportunity. So we started Deliveri with the idea of launching in the US first. The base product will be launched here. And then we want to rapidly expand from Canada all the way to Argentina. And we built the platform in a way that allows us to enter into these countries extremely fast from a technical perspective and from a business perspective. So that in 5 years from now, we are the de facto shipping solution. You create a Shopify store, you get your Stripe payment set up, or your Square payment, you get your supplies from Alibaba or wherever, and then you set up your shipping solution, and it's us, and we're the first option. So
that's very cool. That's very cool. And so you, by working, so let me back up. There's several things there I really want to get into. First of all, you had a career and you decided to go back to school. Did you want to go back to school because you wanted to change careers, or was that part of the, advancing in the career that you were in?
It was a little bit of, well, it was more about entrepreneurship, believe it or not. I had previously started a company right out of undergrad. It was of all things, a karaoke app on the iPhone. It was 2010.
It's all about timing, isn't it?
Yeah, timing's so important. And I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to build software. I didn't know how to read it, a balance sheet really, didn't know finance, didn't know how to raise money. We put a little money into it. Ended up launching, took a couple years, built it, had a good amount of users, but I didn't really have a good understanding of how to create a business, right? Like there's a difference between creating a product and a business.
Right.
And I really just didn't know what to do from there, and ultimately shut it down. And my mentor was just like, go back to school, like go consider school. Like I was working full time at the time. I was doing this on the side. And I said, you know what, like now's the time. It's been 10 years later. And what was interesting was from that experience, that one, not only it gave me the entrepreneurship bug, it made me super excited. I also didn't have anything to do with karaoke. Like I don't sing karaoke. So don't ask me to sing karaoke. You do not want to hear it. But it was a great experience because it really taught me how hard it is, right? It's not an easy endeavor, and you can't half-ass it. Like part-time effort gets part-time results. And it really was something that opened my eyes to one, a greater opportunity, but also like I need to prepare myself so much more. I need to create more tools and skills And I became a self-taught graphic designer. I actually designed the entire delivery platform out of necessity because the karaoke app, I didn't like the designs and I couldn't stand how long it took to make modifications and to always just try to get my vision out to somebody else. It never worked. And I just taught myself how to do it. It took about 8 years, but like I did it for fun on the side. And then I went back to school, put every bit of effort I could into learning finance and entrepreneurship. I majored in both and I really dug my teeth into that. And then that was truly a life changing thing for me. And now I'm taking everything I've gotten from that and from my past experiences and putting it into delivery.
You mentioned several things that I find really interesting, and you brought up side hustles a couple of times. One of the things I've noticed, I've been doing this podcast since 2019, and more started hearing probably 2 years ago. I started hearing more and more of my guests say, I started this as a side hustle. And you brought up the point that you're part timing it doesn't really grow your business. You can do it for fun. You can make a little money on the side, but at some point you have to make that tough decision to either go all in or not. Right. But
100%.
yeah, but you bring up another good point, I think, and that is that building a product is not like building a company. And what do you think were some of the things that, and we'll get back to maybe how your education and your network there helped you, but what were some of the things that you really sort of just got wrong, I guess, from the start because you were thinking in terms of products versus building a company?
Yeah, I think in the onset, especially as like a solo founder initially, and I'm a solo founder with delivery, I made that decision very purposefully. Early on, when you start out, what was the question again? Sorry, I go back.
Well, I'm just wondering what was it that maybe you got wrong, not knowing that
Yeah,
building a product or building
right.
the concept, getting that, especially in software, even even a physical product is not building a company.
Yeah, I think there were two pieces to it. One was not getting the customers initially from the start and having them teed up ready to go when you launch a product, especially in software or services or virtual. And then two, just the general lack of awareness of where my skill sets really fell off the table, right? Like if you don't know how to do bookkeeping, like you need a bookkeeper. If you don't know how to raise money, like you need to raise money. But if you don't know how to hire the right people, right? I mean, that right there is probably the biggest skill that I've been focusing on the last couple of years is how do you find the best people that can service your needs, that complement your strengths, that are also dedicated to the project? Because there are people who, especially in entrepreneurship, there's a lot of people that want to get into it. There's a lot of people that want to work with you or want to be an entrepreneur themselves, but they really just aren't ready yet or at least to work in this environment, because in this environment, it's not corporate. You don't just abide by this very strict law of rules and structures. It's so chaotic and there's so many hats that you have to wear. If you can't handle that and if you can't process that, I don't care how smart you are. It's more than just an intelligence issue. It's an emotional and a grit that you have to be able to put yourself in that environment. And I
Yeah.
think finding those people is incredibly difficult early stage.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
that's something that I spend a lot of focus on now is like, how can I put myself in a position to find the best person? And I've created other techniques to do that, but it was something I think that inhibited me earlier through other companies outside of my own shortcomings.
That is so, so powerful, Jason, because at the end of the day, it is about people. I think, everything comes down to people. concepts, new ideas, pushing hard through all the tough times. It's all about people and whether they're willing to keep pushing long enough to figure it out. I mean, obviously there's the money piece too, which we'll get into later, but and you need enough money to get you through all the mistakes I think that you make in the
Yeah,
early part of launching companies. The companies that survive are the ones I think in many instances that have enough money to push through all of that and the perseverance. But I'm curious, you said you have sort of put together and you're developing a model for how to find the right people. Is there anything you'd share that you've learned along that along that path, that learning path?
Yeah, I think for me, there's a very traditional way to go hire people, right? You can put out a resume or a job description and field resumes. But the better way that I've found is, and there's another bad way to do it too, which is you can just go talk to your friends, right? And you're like, oh, hey, you seem like the right person. You're a developer or whatever, you're a social media or SEO person. And that's not always the best way either. But I've found recently it's more really digging into exactly precisely what you need. Also, not putting a long-term vision on that relationship at this stage. We're not venture backed. We don't have, we haven't done a big fundraise. So we're not necessarily guaranteeing people that either. And that's important because some people will come to you and say, all right, I got this cool job. I'm going to start up, you know, 6 months from now, like we could have a situation where we need to like make payments,
Downsize big
right?
time. Yeah.
Yeah, yes. Ted calls it the true acid test, right? And when your back's against that wall, it's like who's going to really be there with you to keep pushing forward. And my reasons for pushing forward are very different than maybe someone who's working for me.
Yeah.
So that's a hard thing to come by, but you can do it. I mean, you can find people with that experience. People who've started companies before is a good place to start. And then, right now I meet with people, mentors, I call them mentors right now, but they're future partners, like they're future employees that I could see myself hiring down the road. And we keep the relationship very mutually beneficial in the sense of I don't take up too much of their time. They provide enough value to me. I help them in any way I can. Maybe they're starting a marketing company or an ad company or whatever, and I can try to help them grow their business. And then if there's a potential in the future, I'm like, hey, I need you so bad right now. Like you need to stop everything and we're funded. We got the money. You got to come onto this project. And I think that's just something I've taken away from the traditional put a job description, field resumes, because that's so time consuming. You're going to be interviewing dozens of people. 99% of them aren't the right fit just from a emotional, personal level. And it's just, depends on the stage, but yeah.
Yeah. Entrepreneurs really have to be good at pulling together resources. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what you got to be focused on. And those resources come in the form of money and people and knowledge and other assets. But what I'm hearing you say really is that it's all part of the process of networking, meeting people, actually doing work with them that's sort of, let's call it low risk, because you're getting to experience how they work and who they are and what they're made of, so to speak, not just from a skills perspective, but also from other values that you might carry in terms of things like integrity or dependability or conscientiousness, and just to see. And I love that approach of kind of, leasing before you buy.
Yeah, if it's a transactional relationship, it's going to be tough, especially early stage, right? Because it's somebody just wanting something from the other party. And that becomes when things get tight or when things get tough, that transactional relationship instantly becomes a lot of friction. And you got to be very careful in that situation. So that's something I try to point out early.
So when you went back to school, you went back specifically because you were interested in a career as an entrepreneur. Did you have role models when you were growing up? Family, parents, uncles, aunts, neighbors, or is it just that you got kind of excited about the possibilities of doing something for yourself? What motivated you toward that goal of being an entrepreneur?
No, so I actually did not come from a family of entrepreneurs. I was a first generation college student. My parents didn't go to college. My grandparents didn't go to college. I didn't grow up around college, right? I mean, thankfully, I had a good mom who instilled that in me that like I had to go to college. There's no other choice. No matter what, you had to go to college. I went to Virginia Tech undergrad.
So did I went to Virginia Tech.
Did you? I didn't know.
Yeah, I got my doctorate, my master's and doctorate there. So
Okay.
go Hokies.
Yeah. And, went and did that. But at that time, it was just, coming from Northern Virginia, a lot of people worked for the government. My grandmother, who was a huge inspiration for me, had a career at the government. She was a GS-15, which is like one of the highest ranks you can be as a civilian. Um, and she was one of the first women to ever do that as well. And she literally packed a suitcase when she was 17 out of high school with whatever, all her belongings, got on a bus and went to DC. And she created an amazing life for herself. And she was able to fund 3 grandchildren through undergraduate college on a government job, right? At the Pentagon. If it weren't for her constantly pushing me and motivating me and believing in me, introducing me to retirement, 401ks, like I was 16 years old and she's throwing Kiplinger magazines at me every time I came over to the house. And I'm like, I don't even have income. Like, what are we doing with 401ks? But it was a very clear setup. And I'm glad she did it because then even as I went into my career and as I started playing around with entrepreneurship, she was literally the first person to be my cheerleader. And she even gave me a couple $1,000s one time for one of them. And she always said to always have courage. And that's stuck with me ever since she's passed away. And it's something I think about all the time because in entrepreneurship, it literally is courage. And there's a huge uncertainty at the end of that road that can go one of two ways. And that's been really my guiding light to get through all the different situations I've had. But no, from a mentor perspective, grew up very middle class, did not have that idea in my head at the time. Always was go work in corporate, just get a good job, get your health care, your insurance and all that stuff. And then, 2008 recession, all the different things over those years, trying to get my foothold into the corporate world, trying to climb the ladder. And ultimately, it wasn't until I met my wife and met members of her family who were very entrepreneurial. Her grandfather was very entrepreneurial, her uncles. It's actually her mother's cousin who's been my mentor ever since undergraduate. And he's really the person guiding me through a lot of this. But it's different in the sense of, a lot of people hear these things and it's like, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur. I see Steve Jobs. I could easily say Steve Jobs, Bill Gates is my inspiration, but they're such big outliers, right? And they think it's such a macro level that when you're starting off in the entrepreneurial space, you have to get very micro. And it does come down to the nitty gritty and the details because we all have great ideas, but to execute it, you have to understand the operational aspects of the business, the legal structures, the finances, the accounting, all those basic things, or else you never get to be in that macro mindset of like, let's just build the next iPhone. It's not that easy. So people like my mentor, Ted Zoller, I would consider a mentor. They really helped me really hone in that craft at the early stage. And I think that's what most people should pay more attention to is look at those people who are really good at operations and getting things off the ground.
Yeah, so much in there that I loved. I love the grandma story. And I have to ask, what was her name? What was
Barbara.
her? Barbara. Okay. So Barbara, even though Barbara spent her life working for the government, which we think of as the antithesis of entrepreneurship, as someone who has studied an entrepreneurial mindset for the past 20 years, she really exhibited that. She saw opportunities for you. She encouraged you to take action. It sounds like she taught you to execute past failure. And she even put her money where her guidance was from time to time, and to help you through school and help you with businesses. So what a remarkable and amazing
She grew up on a
story that
cotton
is.
farm in Mississippi
In Mississippi.
in the 30s and 40s. So you can imagine what that was like
Yeah.
what the future
Yeah.
held there. And to just take that risk, which is entrepreneurial by nature, go to DC, stay in a hotel until she could buy her first apartment. It really is entrepreneurship is used in a term of creating your own business, but it is a mindset and it's a
Yeah. Yeah.
way to a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah, and she invested in herself basically, and she went out there until she figured it out. And really, entrepreneurship is an investment and a learning journey the whole way, as you pointed out. But I really love that story, and I'm glad you found your way to UNC Chapel Hill. They have great programs there and great support. But I absolutely hear that entrepreneurial mindset coming through from your grandma and the teachings that you had there. There has been a lot of research that's shown that having those kinds of role models make a big difference in whether an individual is willing to step out and take the risk and move forward. So with Deliveri, it's a interesting time. I have been in the entrepreneurship space for a lot of years, and I can remember back to the dot-bomb era, which is kind of when I first got involved in launching an entrepreneurship education program, with the first one. And that whole time period, around 2000, I can remember the technology from the internet and how excited everybody was. And since then, we've had all kinds of technological breakthroughs, and very recently, artificial intelligence. And I'm just wondering, even from the time you started that first business down in Latin America to what you're doing now, I'm guessing the technology has improved such that building Deliveri today, the way that you're building it, wouldn't have been possible even a few years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we use AI anywhere we can, especially on the development side. I don't program or code, but my developers use it. It's required. I make them. I want them to, right? And then also just I use it a lot for just a lot of content writing, a lot of system building. So creating the systems that we have with our CRMs, our backend systems, our claims processes. It just saves so much work. I heard somebody say it's just a great brainstorming partner, and you don't need to hire, a lot of the director level, people are really just big brainstormers in some cases, right? Like, especially in an early stage entrepreneur, like in an early stage startup, it's like, can we go back and forth on some brainstorming these ideas? Well, I don't need a co-founder to do that anymore. I do it with AI. I can just have that conversation now, which basically is a co-founder. And I can say, let's talk about this. Let's think about it. And then I can get 80-90% of the way there and then go to my team with a direction as opposed to an opinion or an offering of an opinion. And that saves us so much time, so much controversy, pulls us into the best practices as well, because you may not always know what those best practices are. And it just gives you such a crazy advantage early on that saves us so much time and money, which is amazing.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful. I found the same thing. And the problem that I run into sometimes is that it creates so many possibilities that I find myself sometimes getting pulled away from my purpose. And so I think that's the one caveat we have to remember. And I know you're doing that. You're staying focused on the problem you're trying to solve, but the technology is just making it so much quicker for us to get there. And I love what you mentioned about using it as AI as a brainstorming partner, because you can have a mentor that gives you advice, and if you don't use it, they can be upset, but AI doesn't care. You can use their ideas or not and move on. So it's a
They
great
even
partner.
compliment you. They even compliment your decision making.
They'll tell you, aren't you? They'll tell you amazing things about yourself.
It sounds crazy, but as an entrepreneur, like, we don't get a lot of compliments from a lot of people, right? So, like, getting just that little affirmation daily is a huge uplift.
That's a great point. That's a great point. It can be lonely
Yeah.
on this journey, but I think, you're doing it right because you've also got the human sides. You do the early brainstorming with your AI partner, and then you get your trusted mentors and team together to figure it out from there. You mentioned team. Could you tell us a little bit about, I know Delivery is in your pre-launch, I think still, I think you mentioned. So you're very early stages. It's really cool to have you on the podcast now talking about that because we can have you back, I hope, later to talk about it after you go through launch. But tell us about the company as it is right now. You mentioned your team. Tell us a little bit about that. Who's helping you build Delivery? And I know you don't have a partner, but how are you doing it?
Yeah, so initially we started with 3 engineers right off the bat that came with me from our last company, but over time they've all moved on to different things personally, which was fine. And then since then I've brought in some other engineers, which is nice to get a little bit of a refresh on that. So we have an engineer and like a fractional CTO at the moment, which is really all we need, mostly because I do all the graphic design and the product. I basically am a product leader, non-technical product leader, I guess you can call me. So I have enough technical background and acumen to know how to build software now. Because we're pre-product, from my experience with the last companies, I spend a lot of time on the customer acquisition at this stage. So garnering the beta users, our pre-launch users, customers who we will bring on during launch, but also the fundraising. The product side, I did that at the onset, right? The first couple months, it was all product, product, product. I set the vision. I had all that ready to go. And I did the design. So it saved us a ton of time and money. Now that we're about 98% done with the platform, it's mostly just we're passing to production now anyway. So we're just going through the bugs and ironing out the kinks. I really, you know, I've had a couple people, maybe 2 people I've brought in and since let go just because it wasn't the right time. Again, from that experience, just trying to be strategic, trying to use other people to grow the business, but timing is so important because every day I'm in the business and working on the business, but I got to be careful because I need to work. If you're working in the business, then you're not working on the business, right? And I try to break that up a little bit, but so far it works. I mean, we have a really talented engineer, and now that we're mostly done with the product, it's stuff that he can handle. And I solution it. I read the APIs with the couriers. I have enough technical background to support it. So
Yeah.
small now, but we do plan to grow it. We're going to grow it near term here.
Yeah, of course. And I heard your vision. I mean, you want to be just like the Spotify or the Shopify for small and medium sized online sellers. So as you think about growing this company, a lot of product builders like you are dealing with trying to figure out not only how to build the product and getting to the customer. And you've got a pretty clear customer definition, I think. But have you thought about funding? And I heard you say raising money and, also partnerships. Like it'd be really cool to be Spotify's partner, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's where my role as a CEO really comes into play, right? And stepping away from the product is spending more time on the fundraising, which is what I'm doing now. We are raising a small pre-seed round. So that's a full-time job as well
Sure.
for any entrepreneur. And then also finding those partnerships. So, I had to go get the partnerships from the couriers, which was not easy. If you have enough fortitude, you can go get those major corporate partners, whether it's hotels or airlines or whatever it is in your business. I would encourage a lot of entrepreneurs not to sell themselves short on that aspect because we've partnered with FedEx, UPS, DHL, USPS, all with just me, like just me chasing them down, going through LinkedIn, building those relationships. It took months, but persistence is so important in entrepreneurship and being persistent. And then really now just focusing more on the go-to-market strategy. So we have a partnership with that we'll be launching with a major collective of small businesses that we'll be doing a go-to-market with them as well. later this year, which we're really excited about. Actually, was just meeting with somebody to help us with that from a marketing perspective. And that's where my role, I try to spend more time thinking of how can I like access a lot of customers through maybe one person or one medium. And that's GC last week, right? Global Entrepreneurship Conference is comprised of a whole bunch of ecosystem builders, people who support entrepreneurial endeavors in their regions, their cities, their countries. I pitched at that conference last year for the World Cup. I pitched Deliveri when it was just a month old idea. We weren't even incorporated yet. And I had so many people come up to me after that pitch from Guatemala, Ecuador, El Salvador, Jamaica, and they were just running up to me saying, "Oh my God, I need your solution in my country. I have a collective of 100 startups, and it's women making hand weaving bags, and they want to sell it, but they have no idea how to ship to the U.S." And I had a great response to that, and it just motivated me so much more coming back from that conference. And then, of course, last week, same thing happened.
Yeah, it's a great group and such a diverse, as you pointed out, such a diverse audience there for you. So especially for your company, I can see it was probably phenomenal. But we live in a global world now, and anybody launching an online business has to think about that. So, it's really interesting because you mentioned, well, a couple of things I want to get to, but, everybody starts somewhere. So, back when Shopify was in its earliest days, one of the founders actually called me, just a cold call at the university, and said, "Hey, we're trying to do a student competition, for young entrepreneurs to introduce them to this new product that we've developed, Shopify." So, it starts with cold calling for almost everybody. So now Shopify is a product that most of us know if you know anything about online retailing. But as I said, one of the founders called me cold call and just said, "Hey, we're trying to get into the universities, just trying to get everywhere we can to get recognition for what we're doing." You also mentioned perseverance, and you mentioned Steve Jobs, and one of his quotes was that perseverance is what separates successful from unsuccessful entrepreneurs. So you're in good company with that. And speaking of perseverance, one of the entrepreneurial mindset factors is really the willingness to execute past failure. And I just wonder if you've had any failure stories along the line that, if you've got a story or that you might be willing to share, and how you have come to think about failure and sort of obstacles and challenges that you meet along the way as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. So I tell a lot of entrepreneurs that I talk to, people have asked me, it's like, "Hey, I want to go work at this startup, or I want to work at this, here, they're offering me equity with this cliff and this vesting schedule." And usually the first thing I'll ask them is, if that fails and you work there for 4 years, you get your equity, but it's worthless. Did you get anything from it? Because you better have, right? From an education perspective, is my point. Are you learning something so that you can take that into the next one? Because the likelihood of you hitting a home run on the first one is extremely small. It's just the laws of large numbers, right? Like, most of us will fail prior to our success. And you have to just swallow that pill, I think, and get to it. And hopefully you don't. I don't want anybody to fail, but just know that going into it, you need to have a idea of like, what can I learn from this? And I did that with all of my failures. So the karaoke app, didn't know much about software or designing software products. So I started doing it for fun on the side and just designing things in the Sketch app pre Figma, right? Before Figma was around. And I did that mostly just because it was an artistic side of me that I got to use, where my day job was very engineered numbers. And it allowed me to kind of just separate that at night. I would literally just sit there at night, watch TV with my wife, and I would just kind of create cool apps or something in design. Never built them, but I just did it for fun, or I'd help a friend or do something, just play with my ideas. Then another part of that failure was we didn't have, we ran out of money, which is usually what most people shut down businesses for. I had no idea how to raise money. I didn't know what a safe was, convertible note, how to price around. how to even talk to investors, no concept of that. I thought, all right, well, why don't I go learn that part of the business? So I actually joined a startup on the side, part time again, as the graphic designer with my new skill set that I just created while still working full time. And I went back to school at this time as well. I just started going back to UNC and I helped them design. And that app, that company was a crowdfunding platform for university spinout companies. So what we did was we helped business companies that were maybe a researcher at a university created a new drug compound and they wanted to spin it out into a business. We would go to the alumni and try to crowd fund the round with a 506CF or something. I can't remember the exact security. But then I started learning about securities and how you actually put together a financial instrument so that people can invest in. And I did that solely so I could learn that. I wasn't particularly passionate about university spin out companies, right? I just knew the people that were doing it were really smart. They had experience in finance and I wanted to just learn more about finance. Same with sales. I went into sales engineering because at the end of the day, entrepreneurship is how well you can sell something. Every founder has to know how to do sales. Again, at that time, I wasn't a salesperson. So I went into sales as a career with the mindset of like, if this fails, there's a fallback of, all right, now I know sales at least. So everything I've ever done, whether it's from my career, but definitely from entrepreneurship, I went into it with a mindset after my first failure, with the mindset of how can I get something out of this? Because the likelihood of success is already very low, but what can I learn so that it benefits me, gives me a step up into the next project that I take on next.
That's perfect. That's perfect. What a great lesson and what a great way to think about failure because it really is our best teacher, right?
Yeah.
Those are the things that we remember. And on top of that, recognizing that, that entrepreneurship is, it's a hypothesis at best, and we're testing it all the way through. And if we're not having failures, we're probably not getting to the truth and what's going to carry us to success. So it's just part of that process and wrapping your head around it, and knowing that you're not alone and that you can use it to learn, I think is a powerful way to reframe it from the way that we sometimes think about failure, where we personalize it and identify with it too much. So
Yeah, I think you just have to be aware that it's there. And I think initially I wasn't aware of that, right? Because we're all so excited about this new business. You have this optimistic naivete, right? It's like, it's going to work. It's a great idea. I'm going to build it and they're going to come. And you're like, oh, wait, this is way harder than I imagined. And I need
and it takes
to,
a lot longer, doesn't it?
yeah, yes, for sure.
That's the other lesson. I think most entrepreneurs are impatient, but it takes a long time. And
Yeah. I mean, I'm
typically,
15 years post my first failure. So
yeah. Yeah.
it doesn't feel like 15 years.
Still got a lot of years ahead of you. So I'm very excited to hear what happens with Deliveri and with everything. But, I know you need to get back to work. This has been a great conversation, but I just have to ask you before you go. I always ask my guests if they had one piece of advice that they could share with maybe themselves before they started all of this, or with someone else that's, interested in starting a business or maybe in the early stages. And I know you're still in the pre-launch, but you've been doing this for a while. What would that one piece of advice be that maybe you wish you had known?
One was what I just spoke about, which was round out your skill set in a little more of a robust way. Try to figure out your pitfalls and either educate yourself on them or, learn, really you just have to educate. You probably don't have the money to outsource that, but educate yourself at least to some degree. And then second, we spoke about it earlier is about product versus business. I see a lot of entrepreneurs bring really cool ideas to the table. They put together a pitch deck, they put together a concept or a business plan, but it's not really a business plan. And they don't know what business plans or what kind of models are out there for them to access or to model themselves after, right? And, you need to really, I think, read up on that, understand. I wish I would have read more business history. Like, it's one of my favorite things to read is like business stories of how GE got started or Ford or whatever. And those are really good examples of how to build a business because you can get exposure to different ones, right? McDonald's or franchise options or S Corps and how people can expand S Corps into a pseudo franchise type situation. And what people don't realize is you can come up with a great idea, but if you don't structure it and structure your business in a way that is one, investable, if that's something you're seeking, or scalable, then you're already setting yourself up for failure because unless you're really lucky, your business itself may fail because it's not structured and set up in a way that makes money in a good form or legally or what have you. That's something I think I try to teach a lot of entrepreneurs that when they bring me ideas is like, okay, it's a great idea, but you don't have a business here. Like think about how this is an actual business.
Yeah, that's really super advice. And I'm sure everybody that's out there thinking about a new idea can benefit from that. I like business history too. I think that's a great piece of advice to tell anybody who wants to be an entrepreneur to go out and read. I read a book many years ago. I'll recommend to you. It's called Brand New, BRAND, Brand New, and it's a Harvard business book, but it's so readable and it's got like 6 stories that include like everything from Wedgwood China to Heinz ketchup to Estee Lauder to Starbucks. And it really talks about how they built their brand. And I think it's kind of a timeless book. It's been out a long time, but it's got great business stories. Great advice, great conversation. Jason, this has been a real treat and a real joy. For anybody who might like to learn a little bit more about Deliveri or maybe connect with you personally, how can they do that?
Yeah, you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. Our website's just ondeliveri.com with a I at the end of delivery instead of a Y, where you can sign up for our pre-launch access and get beta access. And we should be launching the next 4 to 6 weeks. We're waiting on a couple more contracts, but we are getting ready to start rolling it out.
Yeah. So we're recording this in early June. So by July, August, hopefully.
Definitely before the holidays.
Okay. That sounds great. Jason, thank you again for joining me. It's been a treat.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to The In Factor. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. And to learn more about developing your own entrepreneurial mindset, check out my book, See, Do, Repeat, Exploring the Practice of Entrepreneurship, and my upcoming release, Choose Yourself Groups. You can follow us for more daily insights from entrepreneurial journeys. Just go to drrebeccawhite.com. That's drrebeccawhite.com, and you'll find all my books, the back list of all the in factors, and much more about entrepreneurial mindset. Until next time, stay curious, stay courageous, and keep practicing the art of entrepreneurship.